しようかな。何を置こうかな。どれにしようかな。何を置こうかな。何がいいかな。何がいいかな。何を置こうかな。どれにしようかな。何を置こうかな。何がいいかな。何がいいかな。どれにしようかな。どれにしようかな。何がいいかな。どれにしようかな。何がいいかな。何を置こうかな。どれにしようかな。
セーブします。セーブします。
何を置こうかな。どれにしようかな。何を置こうかな。何がいいかな。どれにしようかな。どれにしようかな。どれにしようかな。
So I just created this dope website with Wix. Let me show you how I did it. First up, go to Wix.com.
In this video tutorial, we're going to take a look at 28 of the coolest and most amazing little features and tips and tricks in Photoshop that you may or may not know about. Some of them you may have seen me do videos on recently, but a bunch of them you probably haven't. This is 28 great features of Photoshop that you may not have known about. So in an article that I did a few months ago, I outlined 28 great features of Photoshop that I thought you should know. That's right, 28 great features, and that's because BuzzFeed doesn't do Photoshop, so I mean, someone has to. So 28 great features of Photoshop. Let's get started. Here, the first thing is going to be quickly whiten teeth. We're going to do this, and probably the simplest, most realistic way is not to just bleach teeth perfectly white, but rather to use a vibrance adjustment layer. I like to reduce the vibrance to about -60. I got -58, whatever. Select the mask, hit Command or Control I to flip and fill the mask with black. Then you grab the brush tool, and I like to set the opacity of the brush tool to about 50% or so. I'm painting with the color white, and I'm just going to paint over her teeth. I'm actually going to make my brush a little bit smaller there, and paint over the teeth. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to just neutralize enough of that color to give a nice, realistic white. See, there's before, there's after. Looks white, but not bleached white, and that's important. Now, this tip is something special. This is how to merge all of your existing layers to one new layer, just like that, okay? I feel like I write this hotkey, and it's a very long hotkey in almost every tutorial that I write. This is an important one. It's a long hotkey. Control-Shift-Alt and the letter E. So on the Mac, that would be Command-Shift-Option-E. You just have a layer selected. Boom, you hit the hotkey. You save all of your layers, but you have everything merged to a nice new layer up here. The Rotate View tool is a very important tool and something that is extremely useful when you are retouching, and kind of all the time, but especially retouching and using the paintbrush tool. So if I'm painting, I find that if I draw strokes kind of straight across my screen, I'm a little bit more accurate with my brush tool. So let's say I need to follow her hairline. Well, if you hit the letter R, the hotkey is R, it brings you to what's called the Rotate View tool. And if your computer supports OpenGL or whatever the newest graphical card support system is for Photoshop at the time you're watching this tutorial, you can use this tool and rotate temporarily. This is only a temporary rotation. And so as you switch to the brush tool, and I can paint right in here, get a nice accurate paint, and then hit the letter R again, rotate however I like her to be. And let's say I have her rotated to some crazy angle, 54 degrees, excuse me. I can just hit the Reset View button. Boom. It brings her back just to the way it is supposed to be. The Rotate View tool, very, very useful. There's a really neat and really fast way to change layer opacity, and that's by just selecting the Move tool and hitting any number you want. Let's say I want this, I got this white band here, I want it to be semi-transparent. Let's say I want to make it 70% opacity. I hit the letter or the number 7, boom, 70% opacity. Let's say I want 75. In rapid succession, go 75, and bam, 75% opacity. So that's pretty cool. If you hold down Shift, as I just did, and hit a number, you can adjust the fill opacity. So Shift, and let's say the number 7, well, that brings us 70% as you just saw, but the letter or the number 0 takes it back to 100. And the same thing if I'm not hitting Shift plus a number and hit the number 0, takes me back to 100% opacity. Quick side tip on this main tip: if you're using one of the brush tools like the brush tool or the clone stamp or anything like that, you can hit one of the numbers and it's going to adjust the tool opacity and not the layer opacity. So if you want to adjust the layer opacity, it's important to just select the Move tool. It's just kind of like my go-to. I hit the letter V, which is the hotkey for the Move tool, and then boom, hit a number, and it changes the layer opacity, in this case down to 50%. That's how to quickly change layer opacity with numbers. One of the other really neat things you can do in Photoshop is quickly select another layer just by holding down your Alt or Option key and using the square brackets. So by hitting the left square bracket with the Alt key, you move down the Layers panel, and the right square bracket, you move up the Layers panel. In addition to being able to select layers, if you use instead the Command or Control key, you can actually move that layer. So if you hold Command down and hit the left bracket, you can actually move that layer downward, and the right bracket moves the layer upward. So I can move down, grab this color layer, and lift it up above my sharpening layer, or I can move it back down below, all just using hotkeys, never actually clicking anything in the Layers panel. Occasionally in Photoshop, you need to measure something based on either pixels or inches or something of that nature. You can quickly and easily change your unit of measure by going View, Rulers to show the rulers, and then just simply right-click on the rulers and change the unit of measure from pixels to, let's say, inches. This is also going to change the unit of measure, by the way, over here in like the Info panel when you drag out a selection. See the width, 8.8 by 5.5, that's going to be inches. If I right-click on this and set it to pixels, now we see 1992 width by 1244 height in pixels. So being able to undo as much as we want is a really great thing. Sadly, we can't undo as much as we want, but there are ways, if you go Edit Preferences, let's go Edit Preferences General, that you can actually change the number of history steps which you can undo. So we're going to come over here to Performance, and you can see I have my history state set to 101, just because why not? But you can really increase this up or bump it down. The more history states you have, typically the slower Photoshop's going to run, the more resources it's going to require. So that's kind of why you might want to run maybe less history states versus more. But if you have a computer that is a beast, run as many history states as you like. It's really that easy. And oh, by the way, if you're on a Mac, you would go to the Photoshop menu, Photoshop, Preferences, boom. So there's a somewhat unknown and very underused feature of Photoshop. In fact, I've never even really used it before, but it's something I know about and it's kind of cool. It is the ability to stroke a path with a pattern. So here's how you do it. You create a path just like this, and then you would right-click on the path, and don't choose Stroke Path. Instead, choose Fill Path. Now, here in the Fill Path dialog, you're going to choose, from the Contents drop-down, you're going to choose Pattern. Not any of the colors, but Pattern. And then it's important here, you want to check on Script. And the script you want to choose is place a long path. None of this other brick fill, whatever, cross weave nonsense. Place a long path. Everything else can remain the way it is, and hit OK. What's going to happen is you're going to get a place a long path dialog box where you can change the scale of the pattern, make the pattern larger or smaller, spacing options, all kinds of stuff you can play with. Hit OK, and you're going to see it's going to place this funky looking pattern all along your path. Again, really not sure how you're going to use it, but something that's kind of cool, and there's got to be a really neat way to use it and really cool stuff you can do with it. But just know that it's there. You can stroke a path with a pattern. In Photoshop, you can apply a mask that's already filled with black. So in this situation, you see we have two layers here. One that is kind of like a warmer, richer version of the photo. But let's say we only want to apply this here to the paper. Well, we can immediately hide everything by holding down our Alt or Option key and just selecting the new mask icon. Boom, gives us a mask already pre-filled with black. We can grab our brush tool and we can just paint in our effect over the paper or kind of wherever we want. Let's say you need to find the center point in your Photoshop document very quickly. Well, there's a very easy and very fast way to do this. You can come up here under View and choose New Guide Layout. I don't know if you've ever used that before. And just set up a guide that has a 2-column width, or I'm sorry, 2 columns and 2 rows. And you can see it runs a perfect guide right through the vertical and horizontal centers of your image. And blammo, there's the exact center of your image. One of the coolest tricks in Photoshop that I've ever personally witnessed when I actually learned it in a big group of people, is how to quickly change the color of an object in Photoshop. Now this works especially well on very specular items, stuff that's shiny like the side of this car, stuff that already has a little bit of color in it. If you have shiny and color already there, this effect is going to work beautifully. This couple, well, looks like they're having a boy, right? Because the car is nice and blue, but let's say they just found out that it's actually a girl. We can sample here, grab the pink on her dress, we have a new layer, and I can just paint the car pink. Look at how beautiful our new pink car looks, right? Well, I think you and I both know this looks pretty awful. Well, what we can do, as Photoshop finishes catching up painting, is we can just paint like that, and then change the blend mode to color. And just like that, we have a beautiful pink car. So if you're using Photoshop and you don't use the Quick Mask Selection tool, I think you're really missing out. That is, if you're creating any kind of selections with any sort of regularity. Quick Mask is located right here. Now, before you start using it, quick thing that I think you should do, double click on the icon to bring up the quick mask options, and the default is color indicates masked areas. I think you should set it to color indicates selected areas, and here's why. All you have to do is click on click a single time on the quick mask icon to activate quick mask mode. Grab your brush tool. We're painting with the color black. Let's say we want to create a selection of this coffee mug, right? We can just paint over it really, really quickly. It's going to be a very, very sloppy selection, but you're going to get the point, right? Once I have this all painted in, now if I hit the letter Q, which takes me out of quick mask mode, and by the way, Q also puts you into quick mask mode. You know, before I get out of quick mask mode, see how I'm painting with the color black? If I hit the letter X and paint with white, I can like clean this selection up here, because I'm actually going to paint away some of my quick mask selection right here in the handle, right? Clean up some of that junk. Make that a little bit nicer around the edges there. We're not going to be too perfect. Now, if I just hit the letter Q, it's going to load exactly where I painted as a selection. I can hit Command or Control J now, pop the coffee mug up onto its own layer. It's a crappy selection, granted, but it's a very rough selection. We did it in literally seconds. Quick mask mode. Great to know how to use it, and great to be able to harness the power of it in your own photo editing and Photoshop use in general. So out of the roughly 10,000 different ways to create a black and white image in Photoshop, one of my favorite ways is right up here under Image Adjustments Channel Mixer. And actually, you can make this even better if you use a Channel Mixer adjustment layer. But we go Channel Mixer, and you can tick on Monochrome, and it actually gives you a black and white. You can then play around with your color channels. Typically with a black and white, it's a good idea to try to keep your total number as close to 100% as possible. If you go too low, you're going to just start dropping tones, and if you go too high, you're just going to blow tones out. So let's just go with something that's a little bit more standard, something like that. Whoa, hello, we're way too high. Let's drop our blues way down here. Something like, yeah, something like that looks kind of good. Maybe it's a little bright. And just like that, we've created a black and white. It's just a different way to create a black and white. I think it's kind of interesting. It's a little bit different, and every way of creating a black and white in Photoshop is a little bit different. Gives you different contrast and different tone and detail and things like that. So the monochrome mode in the channel mixer, one cool way to create a black and white in Photoshop. There's a super easy and super quick hotkey to change the color of text and even change the color of fill color layers, and this even works for shapes. So like I draw out a shape like this, we can do the same thing with these kind of shapes. I'm not going to do that for this tutorial, but just know that this exact technique works there as well. Let's say we got relaxing day in bed written right up here. We've got our swatches panel. We want to change the color of that maybe to this really spring green color. I select that, set it as my foreground color, and hit Alt Backspace on the PC. That would be Option Delete on the Mac, and we can fill that layer, or that text in this case, with that color. We can also just select our solid color adjustment layer and apply it to that as well, just using the same hotkey, Alt Backspace. That would be Option Delete on the Mac, and we've totally changed the way this image looks, I think for the worse, so I'm actually going to undo that. But that's a really cool, very speedy hotkey that you can use to change the color of blocks of type without having to, you know, highlight the whole thing and then change the color up here or whatever. Just set the color as set the color as your foreground color, and then use the Alt Backspace or Option Delete hotkey. When you've got some layer styles, or even just a single layer style applied to a layer that you're going to go and scale, so I'm going to hit Command or Control T to bring up Free Transform, and maybe boost this, make it 150 pixels wider, and or 150% more wide, and 150% higher. I apply that. My layer styles have actually stayed the same as they were when they were much smaller. When the text is much smaller, I should say. So in addition to scaling the layer contents up, I need to scale the layer style up. And I do that by going Layer, Layer Style, Scale Effects. And because I know I've gone up 150%, sure enough, I'm going to scale my layer effects up 150% as well. Now, one other quick way to get around this, let's say you're not, you know, scaling an exact 150%, you can actually just right-click on your type layer and convert it to a smart object. And when you do that, and you scale it up, everything kind of remains the same, and you get nice, beautiful layer style effects just like that. When you're working with any kind of brush tool in Photoshop, here I might want to add even more dodging and burning to this guy. It's nice to be able to see the exact center of your brush tool. You can do that by going Edit Preferences and choose Cursors and check on Show Crosshair in Brush Tip. Hit OK, and you can see now with our brush tool, well, it's actually the dodge tool, I can now see exactly where the center of my brush is, so I can more precisely paint exactly where I need to paint when I am dodging and or burning this fella. One great feature that is universally useful in Photoshop is the Alt or Option key. Virtually anything in Photoshop that you touch with the Alt or Option key means you're going to duplicate it. Whether or not it's a layer, you just click and drag while holding the Alt or Option key, or even a layer in the Layers panel. I'm holding down the Alt or Option key, and you can see I've duplicated, and I actually have a third yellow box now. You can do that with multiple layers. Now I've got 2 additional yellow boxes. The Alt or Option key, use it to duplicate, well, anything. As you work through and build up layer after layer after layer in your file, sometimes you want to quickly go back and see what you started with, so you can figure out, hey, have I made any progress, or does this just look like crap? You can do this very easily in Photoshop by holding down the Alt or Option key and selecting any layer eyeball, and what it does is it shuts off all of the other layers except that layer. So you can see now it takes me back to the original image, which in this case I think actually looks better than all this junk we've added on top of it in Photoshop. So the Alt or Option key and click any eyeball. See, there now we just have our black and white adjustment layer on. Oh, and by the way, you get out of this mode by holding on the Alt or Option key and clicking on that layer eyeball one more time. In Photoshop, there's a hidden tool hiding out underneath the eyedropper tool, and it's the ruler tool, which you can use to straighten images. But before we get into this, the newer, better way to do this is actually to grab the crop tool, hold down the Command or Control key, and you can see it switches to the ruler icon. You can draw a straight line across, well, something that should be straight in your image, and it's going to straighten it with the crop tool, and then you can hold down your Shift and Alt or Shift and Option keys and just crop the image in, commit the change, and you'll have a nice straightened image. Now, if you do want to do it the older way with the ruler tool, it basically works the same way. You just draw a line across something that should be straight and hit the Straighten Layer button up in the top bar. That's it. You can straighten images in seconds. A pretty cool image navigation function of Photoshop is what's called bird's eye view. This is when you're zoomed way in on an image and you want to get to another part of the image quickly. You can just hold down the letter H and click and drag and zoom in on literally any other part of the image that you like very, very quickly. Clipping masks are essential and really easy to use and really important stuff. And they're super easy to learn how to use. So here's what they are. Basically, I have some type, Zoo York, whoever used to do that, I don't remember. But Zoo York over a photo of New York. And we want to basically make the text of New York look like the inside of Grand Central Station. Well, you can do that by holding on the Alt or Option key, hovering between the Zoo York text layer and the photo of Grand Central Station.
アイテム拾ったよ。
ちゃんとついてこいよ。
頑張ってください。
やってやるぜ。いいぜ。ちゃんとついてこいよ。
よし、行きましょう。大丈夫ですか？
ちゃんとついてこいよ。
よし、行きましょう。7ですよ。大丈夫？大丈夫ですか？
いや
大丈夫ですか？
いや
So I just created this dope website with Wix. Let me show you how I did it. First up, go to Wix.com. Now this is where the magic happens. You're gonna add an image and some text. Oh, that's nice. First, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with the font. Wait a minute, Frank, Brandon, David, who are these guys? You know, one day I'm gonna create feral font. You guys know I got a lot of videos. Here, I've uploaded them all. And with a subscription, you guys can check out my top secret material.
Hey, yo, I'm killing it in this high quality.
ちゃんとついてこいよ。
See, I'm a sharing kind of guy. So here's my Instagram, instant access. I look good, what? Man, I know how hard it is to make people stand up and listen, but with a site like this, you're already there. Go to Wix.com and create your stunning website today. That's all you got to do. It ain't hard. You ain't doing nothing. Stop eating chips.
Sync it up.
こいつ
One.
大丈夫ですか？
Hey everybody, welcome to this Photoshop tutorial brought to you by tutvid.com. Today we're going to talk and take a look at, actually I should say, how many? 36 essential hotkeys for Photoshop. Now these are just like hotkeys that I went through and realized I'm using all the time. And if you're using Photoshop, they're hotkeys that I think you should definitely know. These things are like muscle memory to me as I'm jumping through Photoshop. Sometimes in my other tutorials I even use them and they're just right there in my head, so like automatically I forget to even mention what the hotkey is. So we're going to take a look at this. I also have mounted the camera now. Some of you noticed I have kind of a wobbly desk and my monitor really jiggles. It's a huge monitor, so it moves back and forth. My desk has really long, really skinny legs. That looks really, really bad when I do that. My desk has really long legs. So it shakes a little bit. So I mounted the camera. Thank you for those comments. And what else? Oh, you can support tutvid.com. A little link will appear right up here in that part of the video. I'm selling a course all about like advanced retouching in Photoshop. It really helps support the site if you pick up a copy of it. If not, there's tons of free tutorials. Don't worry. Don't get yourself upset about not being able to support or whatever. So let's get into this tutorial right here and start talking about 36 essential hotkeys for working in Photoshop. All right, number one, we want to know how to create a new document. Command or Control N brings up the new document dialog box, obviously much faster than going File, New, every time you want to create a new document. That can be really helpful. Creating a new layer, Command Shift or Control Shift and the letter N will bring up the new layer dialog box where you have to give it a name. You can also do things like say, hey, use previous layer to create a clipping mask, add a color, blend mode, and opacity right off the bat. You can hit OK, and you can see you've got a new layer. But sometimes when you're working, you just want to throw a new layer in there like that instantaneously. If you want to do that, the hotkey is Command-Shift-Option or Control-Shift-Alt and the letter N, and it bypasses that dialog box, so you don't have to worry about that. Now, you can duplicate any layer at any time. Let's just duplicate this Curves Adjustment layer to add more contrast. We can duplicate everything Command or Control and the letter J. You can see we've doubled up our contrast, our Curves Adjustment layer here. You can also, by the way, with this effect, use like the lasso tool or any selection tool and select a piece of a layer and hit Command or Control J, and you can see here we've moved this bit of the image up onto its own layer. So you can also do that with any of the selection tools, so that's kind of cool. Now, if you want to select multiple layers, you can select the topmost layer and then move down to, like, let's say we want to select everything except the original background image. Move down to this curves layer, hold down the Shift key, and click, and it will select that layer and every layer in between. So you select all these layers at once. Now, if you just want to select like this layer and the channel mixer layer, you can select this layer, hold down Command or Control, and you select out here on this part of the image, or the layer. Don't select the thumbnail for the layer out here, and you can see we just grabbed those two layers. We can throw like the background layer in there, and maybe the top curves adjustment as well. And then you could do something like, you know, group these, or duplicate them, or reduce the opacity, or I'm sorry, get rid of the visibility of them. Or I mean, you could reduce the opacity as well. There's a bunch of stuff you can do, but just know there's a bunch of different ways you can select layers. You can either select them in a straight line, or just kind of these individual layers as you need them. Now, let's say we want to merge layers together. You can merge layer 2 with layer 1. This command is just like merge below or merge downward or something. Or what is it here? Over in layers, we have merge down. Note the hotkey Command or Control E. So Command or Control E, we merge layer 1 with layer 2. Now, what if we want to merge all of our layers up to a new layer instead of just merging a couple layers? Oh, by the way, I should say you can actually select just a few layers like this and hit Command or Control E, and you will merge all of those layers into one layer as well. You can see it kind of changes the complexion of the image a little bit because we're messing around with an adjustment layer. You can merge all of your layers up to a new layer by holding down Command Shift Option or Control Shift Alt and the letter E. You're going to see it's merging all of our stuff up to a, well, in this case, not a new layer. The reason it didn't do this is because this layer is a transparent layer. If I do something like just grab the brush tool and draw a black line across it, and then Command Shift Option or Control Shift Alt E, you can see it merges all of these lower layers up to a new layer. We don't really need to do that. I'm going to undo that. We can group multiple layers together. So let's say we want to group all of our adjustment layers into a layer group. Select the top adjustment, hold down Shift, select the bottom adjustment, and use the hotkey Command or Control G. It groups those layers up. We can just now name this adjustments. If we want to ungroup it, the hotkey to ungroup is Command Shift or Control Shift and the letter G, and you will ungroup the layers that you have grouped together. Now, you can also duplicate a single or multiple layers. Let's say we want to duplicate this entire black and white effect. We can select all the layers, hold down the Alt or Option key, and drag the group of layers up. You can see it doubles up those layers. You can also do it, obviously, with a single layer. We just grab this curves adjustment, hold down Alt or Option, drag it upward, and we duplicate that layer and drop it in place. I'm going to get rid of that layer just by hitting the Delete or Backspace key. Hey guys, I just want to take a quick break from going through these hotkeys. Do you follow me yet on Snapchat? My username is tutvid.com. Yes, that is tutvid.com, not just regular tutvid. Somebody else got that. But you can do that, or I'll pop a graphic up here on the screen, probably somewhere right about here. And you can scan that or screenshot or do whatever you like with it. Make sure you follow me over on Snapchat. I do all kinds of behind-the-scenes stuff and just have some fun with it. It's a little bit of a different side of me than I post on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, anything like that. So, if you're on Snapchat, I'd love to see you. Now, when you have contents on a layer, let's take layer 2 here and draw some pixels on it. I'll draw, I don't know, I'll get the custom shape tool, actually, and we'll just make this big sort of do not enter thing. If we want to load this as a selection, you can hold down Command or Control and click on the layer thumbnail. You can see it loads that shape as a selection. Pretty cool. So we could do all kinds of things with a selection now. You can deselect when you have a selection active like this by hitting Command or Control D. I cannot emphasize how important this hotkey is. One of the first hotkeys I ever learned in Photoshop, and I still use it. It is a hotkey I use, I would say, just about every single time I go into Photoshop, whether I'm working on a website design, a UI design, whether I'm retouching a photo, like no matter what it is, I'm always selecting and deselecting. And the alternative to using the hotkey is going select, deselect, which takes a bunch of time, way more time than just hitting Command or Control D, boom, deselect. Now, if you want to select everything in your document, which is really just load the entire document as a selection, Command or Control A loads everything as a selection. You can also go select all, and you can see Command or Control A is in fact the hotkey, but we're focused on the hotkeys, right? Command or Control A to select, and we'll just deselect that using our newfound knowledge of the deselect hotkey. Now, when you make a selection like that, sometimes you'll make a selection and you'll deselect it and realize, oh no, I need that selection again. Well, you can use the hotkey Command Shift D or Control Shift D, and that will reload your last loaded selection. So that can be really, really helpful if you accidentally deselect a very complex selection and you need to get it back real quick. So I'm going to deselect this. I'm going to load my little X marks the spot or whatever, do not enter sign, crosshair, as a, it's not really a crosshair. I'm going to load that as a selection. I'm going to shut that layer off, though. I want to select everything except this. So what I can do is simply load this as a selection and then inverse my selection by hitting Command-Shift or Control-Shift-I. That will select everything else. So if I do something now like add a curves layer adjustment, go to the red channel, and boost up red, you're going to see that red goes everywhere except that little area that we didn't have selected, because really we selected everything except the shape of this graphic. Stuff. Let's talk about the selection tools here. So when you're using like a rectangular marquee tool and you drag out a selection, you can always add to the selection by holding down the Shift key and drawing out another selection. You can see we're sort of building off of the selection. If you hold down the Alt or Option key, you can cut away parts of the selection that you have created. So very quickly you can go in and chop and hack and add and subtract to make the perfect selection. Another cool thing is, let me just deselect this, when you're dragging out a selection, before you commit the selection and let go with your mouse button, you can hold down your space bar and move your selection around so you can sort of get the perfect selection. So if I need to select around his lips and get a very tight selection, I can keep messing around and moving my selection just right, so when I commit and let go with my mouse, I get a selection that I actually want. I'm going to deselect this as well. As you go on using Photoshop, you may start, using different foreground and background colors, and then you realize, you know what, I need to get back to my foreground and background colors, the original default foreground and background colors. Hit the letter D. That takes you back to black and white. And then sometimes when you're working, you have, two wildly different foreground and background colors, and you need to switch between them. Maybe you're painting something, maybe you're masking something, you need to go back and forth from black to white. Just hit the letter X, and that flips your foreground and background color. Again, much faster than going and selecting the default swatches icon or the little arrow flippy back and forth icon. Just the letter D to get the default colors and the letter X to exchange the foreground and background colors. Now let's say we've selected, I don't know, one of these sort of salmon colors, and we have a selection here, and we have the selection up on a new layer. How do we fill our selection with our foreground color? Well, the hotkey, you could go edit, fill, and go through that rigmarole, but the hotkey is Alt or Option, Option Delete on the Mac. This is probably the easier way to say it. Option Delete on the Mac, or Alt Backspace on the PC. So Option Delete, and we fill with the foreground color. Now you can do Command Delete to fill with the background color. That would be Control Backspace on the PC. So Option Delete or Alt Backspace, Command Delete, Control Backspace, depending on whether or not you're using Mac or PC. That's how you fill with either the foreground or the background color. Now, I should mention that if you don't have a selection, you can use this command to just fill that entire layer. So Option Delete, and I fill the entire layer with that pink or salmon color. And I go like Blend Mode, Soft Light, and now I've given my entire image kind of this color overlay. I don't really want that. In fact, I'll delete everything there, and we're back to our image being the way it is. So when we're using the brush tool, if I grab the brush tool, I can quickly sample new colors. Let's say this was still the color version of this image, and I'm painting, and I want to sample like this blue out here. I can hold down the Alt or Option button, and I can sample colors out of my image, paint with them, and maybe sample a different color, paint with that, maybe sample another color here, and paint with that. So holding down the Alt or Option key while you are using the brush tool will allow you to quickly change your foreground color and sample colors from anywhere here in your Photoshop document. Another cool brush hotkey and a very essential tip, instead of right-clicking to change the size of your brush tool or the hardness of your brush tool, you can instead just use the bracket keys, those little bracket keys to the right, of the P button on your keyboard. You can hit the right bracket to make your brush bigger, the left bracket to make your brush smaller. You can hold down Shift and use the left bracket to make your brush softer, or Shift and the right bracket to make your your brush harder. So there's a very hard brush, there's a very soft brush. Now that we have this artwork up on this new layer, we can talk about free transforming. In fact, maybe I'll just delete this. Let's get a legitimate shape here. I'm going to choose a different shape, something that I know what it is. Let's use a musical note here, all right? So we're going to use this musical note. I'm going to drag it out, and we have this piece of artwork. What if we're looking at this piece of artwork and we decide, you know what, we need to transform it? Well, Command or Control-T brings us to the free transform, where we can stretch this, make it smaller, make it larger, stretch it out, you do all kinds of crazy stuff. We can generally free transform our piece of artwork. And by the way, if you just have an entire layer that's an image, like the background layer, you can free transform the whole layer. Side note to that, I should add that you have to unlock the background layer before you can actually transform the background layer, and unlocking the layer is as simple as double-clicking on it. But let's talk about this free transform. An essential hotkey when you start actually free transforming is holding down the Shift key when you scale an object. That forces the object to remain proportionate. So instead of being able to make the music note all wacky, hold down the Shift key, and it will constrain proportions. Now, you can also hold down the Alt or Option key, and that will zoom and scale your image from wherever you have the center point placed. So if I place the center point down here on the music note, you're going to see that our image is going to scale down toward that center point and up away from that center point. So holding down the Alt or Option key, and by the way, you don't have to hold down Shift when you do that. I can do this, and I can do it all out of proportion, but by adding the Shift key while I'm holding down the Alt or Option key, we constrain proportion, and we scale to or from wherever that center anchor point is located. All right, so now that we've done that, we're going to go ahead and talk about changing image size. Command Option.
So I just created this dope website with Wix. Let me show you how I did it. First up, go to Wix.com.
Option or Control-Alt-I will bring up your image size dialog box, and in here you can go from, well, I don't want to upload an image that's 5,000 pixels wide to Facebook. I want 2048, right? That's the magic Facebook width. So you can go in here and quickly change your image size, upside, downside, whatever you want. Command-Option-I, Control-Alt-I on the PC. Let's go back down here to our background layer. I'm going to actually get rid of the music note for a second. Let's go back to the background layer and hit Command or Control-M to bring up curves. Now, it's not the hotkey. That's just kind of an aside hotkey. When you're working with something like this, and let's just go crazy with the curves in here, and let's say we really butcher the image and mess it up, and we realize, this is not really what I was going for. In virtually every dialog box in Photoshop, and I mean every dialog box that I can think of, you can hold down the Alt or Option key, and your Cancel button will switch to a Reset button, which will reset the dialog box to the default of that dialog box. Very, very helpful, so you don't have to go and get rid of everything and open up a dialog box all over again. You can stay right there in the dialog box, Alt or Option, boom, reset, and get back to work. Super fast, super easy. So let's say we're working here in Adobe Camera Raw, and we're opening up a RAW photo in Photoshop. You can just hit Open Image, and it opens a pixel-based image. But if you hold down the Shift key, you can switch your Open Image button to an Open Object button. Open Object will open your photo as a smart object in Photoshop and allow you... Well, it's going to ask me to update all kinds of stuff, so I'm not actually going to open it. But when you open a smart object, you can always double-click on the thumbnail of the image, and it'll bring you back to the Camera Raw editor so you can continue working on it in Camera Raw, even after you've done a bunch of retouching in Photoshop. It can be very helpful. Open an object as a smart object in Camera Raw. And by the way, I should add, if you just want your images to always open as smart objects, you can always click on your little workflow output settings here and tick on Open in Photoshop as Smart Objects, hit OK, and you can see you automatically have an Open Object button. And at this point, if you ever just wanted to open an image, hold down Shift, and it will open it as not a smart object. So now I like typically to keep it as default, open a smart object, and if I just want to open the image, well, you guessed it, I go ahead and hold Shift and just open the image. I'm going to close out Adobe Bridge. And I want to talk about navigating between multiple open documents here on Photoshop. I only have one document open, so I'm going to go... Oh, I want to go back to Photoshop. I want to go Image, Duplicate. We're just going to duplicate one image here. You know what? Actually, we're going to just for the sake of what I'm going to do here. So you can see we have 3 tabbed documents. I can hold down Control-Tab, and this is Control-Tab whether you're on Mac or PC. Control-Tab, and it's going to take me to the next image. Now, it looks like nothing's different because the image is the same exact image, but watch up here. You can see the active tab. There we go. We go to the next image, Control-Tab, Control-Tab, go to the next image. Now you can do Control-Shift-Tab to go to the image before in your tab lineup. So that's a nice little hotkey when you're moving around multiple images in Photoshop. You're navigating from one image to the next, and then you want to go back, and you can just quickly jump between open images in Photoshop, and it's really super easy. let's create a new layer here. And remember we talked about the selection tools earlier, getting a perfect square, things like, oh no, we didn't actually talk about getting a perfect square, but here's how you get a perfect square with a selection tool or a shape tool. Just like with everything else, the shift key, think of it as the proportion hotkey. When you're free transforming, it keeps things in proportion, and also when you're dragging out something like this wonderful square, you get a perfect square, not a rectangle, not any kind of other shape. The same thing goes for the elliptical tool, so even the elliptical marquee tool or the ellipse tool, but let's just do the elliptical marquee tool. You can see when I drag it out, I get all kinds of ovals. I hold down the shift key and I get a perfect circle. Incredibly helpful when you're creating shapes, when you're creating selections. Just use that shift key. It's so insanely helpful. And just like with free transform, if you hold down the alt or option key, you can draw your circle or square out from the middle. So the circle or square, the middle of that circle or square or rectangle, whatever, will be right where you begin clicking. So typically, where you begin clicking is going to be like that top left corner, if you will, of the square or circle. Well, by holding on Alt or Option, make it the middle. Now, once you've done a bunch of things in Photoshop, you probably will realize, well, this doesn't look all that great. I want to begin undoing. In fact, what I'll do, I'll drag out a bunch of squares here on this layer, and let's say we want to undo. Well, of course, Command or Control Z, as you can see, will undo things. But the problem is you hit Command or Control Z multiple times, and what happens is it undoes a step, but then it redoes that step. Okay? So in order to undo multiple times, you need to do what's called stepping backward. And it's called stepping backward because you're stepping backward in your history panel. You step back, like that, up your history panel. So note the hotkey Command Alt or Command Option because I'm on the Mac, but it would be Control Alt Z on the PC. So you can go Command or Control Z to undo, and then Command or Control Alt or Option in the letter Z to undo multiple times. You can see we can undo all of that stuff that we went and did just a moment ago. So if we go ahead and drag out some type and type whatever, guy and car, that's fine, and we realize we like the type, instead of going up here and hitting the check icon every single time, remember you already have your hands on the keyboard. It's so easy to use the hotkey Command Return. This would be Control Enter on the PC, and you commit your type change in a snap. Now, if you don't like creating a nice, fancy black and white like this, you can actually desaturate, an image in a hurry by simply selecting the layer you want to desaturate, like the background layer. It's got all of our color on it. I'm going to hide the text layer for a second. And use the hotkey Command-Shift, this would be Control-Shift on the PC, Command-Shift-U, and it will desaturate your image. Now, obviously, you can see this desaturated version. This isn't really like your photo quality desaturation. This is a desaturation you use when you just quickly need to get rid of all the color, maybe take a look at the lighting of the image or something like that. It's not really what you're going to want to use for a final, finished black and white. In fact, if I just undo that and check out the black and white that we applied with adjustment layers, you can see how much more rich and deep and sharp and contrasty this black and white is with these adjustment layers. Now, if you want to zoom into your image to check out some details or zoom out, Command or Control and the plus and minus keys, as you may well expect, allow you to zoom in and out very, very quickly. And by the way, when you do zoom in, you can just hold down the space bar and switch any tool that you're using to the hand tool and quickly navigate around your image. Very helpful indeed. In fact, when we zoom in, you can see they did some retouching here underneath his nose and did not really cover it up all that well. All right, let's zoom back out. Now, if you're looking at an image and you want to quickly just zoom it to fit the open area of your screen, Command or Control and the number 0 will zoom your image as big as it can get, but still allow you to see every pixel there available on your screen. So you can see it doesn't zoom as wide as it could, because if it went that wide, it would cut off bits of the top and bottom. So it just zoomed until the top and bottom fit perfectly, and there we go, we have it. Now if I move this little bar way out like this and hit Command or Control 0 again, you can see now it fits side to side because, well, I messed up my interface. Not only can you zoom to fit what you can see, but you can also just zoom straight to 100% by hitting Command or Control and the number 1. And by the way, any of these effects you can get by simply double-clicking on like the corresponding tool, in the toolbar. So double-clicking on the hand tool will force your image to fit on the screen, that Command or Control 0, and double-clicking the magnifying glass will automatically zoom you to 100%. So that's just like a little sort of side tip to the hotkeys. I'm going to quickly use the hotkey we talked about before, image size, Command, Option, or Control, Alt, and the letter I to knock this image down to 2048 pixels wide, because I want to talk about saving this image for the web. So we have some save for web options as far as exporting, export as, and also save for web legacy. The hotkeys, you kind of have to twist your fingers up a little bit, but they can be really helpful. Control, Shift, Alt, or Command, Shift, Option, S. This is the legacy, the old style save for web dialog box. You can do JPEG, GIF, PNG8, PNG24. You can go ahead and save it. By the way, this is probably the dialog box you want to use if you're creating an animated GIF here in Photoshop. It's just, I don't know, I found it just much easier to export actual animations and not have things go awry. So I still use it when I'm exporting animations, and sometimes just force of habit, I fall back and use it. It works fine, but we do have a newer export as, and that is Command Shift Option or Control Shift Alt W, and this will bring up export as, and this has all kinds of advantages because you can resize your image right here when you export it, so you don't have to resize your PSD, for instance, if you're working with a huge PSD and you don't want to like knock the size way down, but you want all that great quality, resize it here on export as. You can embed metadata, convert color space, embed your color profile, change your format, change your quality, all that good stuff. You can also export multiple versions of the image if you're working with responsive web design and responsive UIs and things like that. So you can export multiples. If you're exporting like a button image or whatever, the navigation bar, a background, whatever it may be, export all, boom, choose where you want to save it. It's that easy. Now, aside from saving from the web, you may also just want to save an image out of Photoshop, not maybe as a JPEG, but maybe you just want to save your PSD. Command-Shift-S or Control-Shift-S will allow you to save as. So that's going to allow you to pick a new place on your hard drive, boom, choose to save it there. You can also, from your format drop-down, choose something like JPEG, and you're going to get just a very high-quality, not really all that optimized JPEG, not really something you want to share on the web, but maybe you're exporting a JPEG for printing. Maybe you should export a TIFF for printing or consult your printer to see what they want. But if you're printing a JPEG, you're probably better off exporting a JPEG this way than through export as or a save for web type dialog box situations. You can do it here. There's also a plethora of other file types you can export and save as. And obviously, as you're working through your document, you can just quickly hit Command or Control S to save at any time. That's kind of a no-brainer. And last but not least, closing a document in Photoshop. So closing a document, but not closing all of Photoshop, is Command or Control W. It's going to say, would you like to save changes? No, I don't really care about that. And my other open document, Command or Control W, and no, I don't really care about that either. And we're left just with this original image. So for 36 essential hotkeys in Photoshop that at least I think you really ought to know, that's it. Get it? Got it? Good. Nathaniel Dodson, Tupgood.com. I'll catch you in the next one.
Typography is a beautiful group of letters, not a group of beautiful letters. That's a quote by Steve Byers. Are you a graphic designer? Are you infatuated with type? If so, leave a comment below and share your absolute favorite typeface right now. Also, hit the like button for this video, subscribe to my channel so you never miss another tutorial that I have to share with you guys, and sign up for my newsletter. I'll send you a Photoshop course, 30 tips and tricks on working faster in Photoshop. You're absolutely going to love it. And also, you can follow me on Snapchat, on Instagram, on Twitter, and of course on Facebook.
Nak beli tiket bas. 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 Mana nak beli tiket bas?
Inilah jadi kalau tak cuk tempat dengan Red Bus.
Lain kali, cuk tempat dengan Red Bus.
Ini Johan. Di tempat kerja, dia pemenang. Di luar tempat kerja pun, dia pemenang. Dan sekarang, dia pemenang dalam peraduan penuhi impian Red Bull. 2 Toyota Hilux dan hadiah wang tunai untuk direbut. Sertai peraduan penuhi impian sekarang dan anda pun boleh jadi pemenang. Info di Facebook Red Bull Malaysia.
Today we're gonna cover everything you need to know about the pen tool in Photoshop, especially if you're a beginner. This is the video for you. Right from what is the pen tool to making the most complex selections and many other applications. In this video, we'll make sure that you get up and running with the tool. So without any further ado, let's get started. Before we begin with anything, I want you to remember the letter P. I'm gonna flash it on the screen right now time and again so that you don't forget. This is the most important letter if you want to learn the pen tool. I don't want you to click with the mouse or the tablet on the pen tool ever. Please use this shortcut, letter P. Enough of flashing, let's get started. So what is the pen tool? Well, the pen tool allows you to draw 2 points, point A and point B. Let me turn this on. Point A and point B, and allows you to draw a line between those points. And that's pretty much it. And this line can be straight. This line can also be a curve. That's all there is. Now this is the fundamental of pen tool. Now you can extend it to create complex shapes, paths, so on and so forth. What is paths and shapes? We'll get to that later, but we need to remember one thing. Anything you do with a pen tool is a vector. Okay, it's not a raster, it's a vector. So what's the difference between vector and raster? Here's the difference. A vector is based on mathematical formulas. A raster is based on pixels, right? The picture that you take with a camera is a raster because it's made up of tiny pixels. When you bought the camera, they might have said you the camera is 24 megapixels or 50 megapixels, which means the picture that you take with it consists of 50 million pixels. What are pixels? Small squares with color information. They combine together to give you the image. Vector, on the other hand, is any graphic which is based on mathematical formulas and not on pixels. For example, a simple mathematical formula like y equals x determines a straight diagonal line, 45 degrees, right? No matter how much you zoom it, here's the special thing about vectors. No matter how much you zoom in, it will never pixelate. Why? Because it's not made up of pixels. Let me illustrate. In Photoshop, if you draw any shape, let's choose a custom shape and choose any shape that you like. And let's choose a color, maybe red. That's fine. And we're going to choose shape. Now, if you draw it, this is fine. This is a fine red colored spade or whatever that is. Now, since this is vector, you can make it as big as you want. Let's make it this big. And it's still razor sharp. Have a look. It's still very sharp. If you make it smaller, just like this, Controller Command T, and let's make it smaller, and hit enter. Okay, now again, let's make it bigger. It's still sharp. You can do this again and again, and it always stays razor sharp. But this doesn't happen with raster images because they are made up of pixels. And once you make them smaller, they burn themselves down into those pixels, and once you make it bigger, it kind of messes up. Remember, this canvas, it's made up of pixels. So if you zoom in, okay, if you zoom in, it's going to pixelate because this canvas is made up of pixels, right? Remember, but this object, the shape, is a vector. Now, let's do the same thing. Let's delete it. Okay, let's select it. Let's delete it. Now, create a new layer. Select the same shape, and this time, select pixels. Now it will be created of pixels. Let's make it. Now, if you make it bigger, it might not pixelate in the first glance, right? I made it bigger. Let it. Okay, it's still sharp, not bad. Once you make it smaller, just like this, hit enter, and then again when you make it bigger, have a look at this. It has lost all the details. It's totally crazy right now. Have a look. It's crazy. All you need to know is that anything you do with the pen tool is a vector. Simple, right? Now, how to use the pen tool? Pretty simple. Use the letter P. Don't forget it. P is the shortcut for the pen tool. Press the letter P. Second thing, select what you want to do. You want to make a path or you want to make a shape. What are those? We'll get to that later. First, let's understand path. Now, what is a path? A path is a line, a vector line with no thickness. Okay, if you make a path like this and if you save the image, it won't show up. You can add thickness to it. You can convert it into a shape, a selection, or do a lot of things with it. Add stroke, but a simple path, just path, is a vector line with no thickness. All right. So
How to make a straight path? It's very simple. Dot, click once, click twice, click thrice, 4, 5, 6, 7. And once you reach the starting point, it shows you a circle, which means the circuit is complete, right? Just click here and the shape will be complete. Now you can do anything with it. You can make it a selection, make selection, or do anything with it. So we'll get to that later, okay? Now let's talk about path. What if you want to make a curved path? Okay, let's go back. And one of the greatest things about using the pen tool while you're making a selection is that you can go back by point. That's amazing, right? Okay, to make a curve, it's simple. Let's open up the point A and point B so that it becomes easy for you. On point A, I have a point. On point B, instead of just clicking there, we will click and drag. It becomes a curve. Now once you click and drag, look at this. What is this? This is a handle. Now, a handle influences the curve. Let me do that again for you. If you click and drag, this is the handle. Now, if you move the handle this way, if you rotate the handle, this will determine the degree of the curve. Now, what is degree? Degree is simply the angle, 60 degree, 90 degree, 0 degree, right? Okay. Now, if you make the handle longer, this will control the intensity of that degree. Suppose this is the degree that you want. If you make the handle longer, it will increase the intensity of it, right? Degree, we are changing the degree. We are changing the intensity of that particular degree. Got it? Okay. Now, if you look at the handle, it has two parts. This part and this part. This part influences this curve. Now, what does this part do? This part will influence the upcoming curve. Now, what do we mean by upcoming curve? So if you make a point here, see how this curve is influencing that, right?
So I just created this dope website with Wix. Let me show you how I did it. First up, go to Wix.com. Now this is where the magic happens. You're gonna add an image and some text. Oh, that's nice. First what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with the font. Wait a minute, Frank, Brandon, David, who are these guys? You know, one day I'm gonna create feral font. You guys know I got a lot of videos. Here, I've uploaded them all. And with a subscription, you guys can check out my top secret material.
Hey, yo, I'm killing it in this high quality.
See, I'm a sharing kind of guy. So here's my Instagram, instant access. I look good, what? Man, I know how hard it is to make people stand up and listen, but with a site like this, you're already there. Go to Wix.com and create your stunning website today. That's all you got to do. It ain't hard. You ain't doing nothing. Stop eating chips.
Now, you can anytime edit it by holding Control or Command if you're using a Mac. Hold the Control or Command and you can edit it like hell, right? You can edit this handle, you can edit this point, you can do anything you like. Have a look. You can make it shorter, longer. Isn't that wonderful? Let's go back. Let's understand one more thing. Now, instead of starting out with a point, we could have started out with a handle straight away, okay? So let's go back and instead of starting out with a point, if you at the moment in the beginning, just click and drag. This creates a handle. Now the next time you make a point, the curve will be influenced by that. Click and drag. Now what's happening? A curve is now influenced by two handles, right? You can edit it anytime you like by holding the key Control or Command. Hold the key Control or Command. It takes you to the direct selection tool and you can edit it real time. And once you're satisfied, you can continue, okay? Or you could have continued by clicking and dragging, right? And you can finish it right there. Done. So that's how you do it. using two handles. Now, why should we use two handles? There are a lot of advantages on using two handles. Suppose you want to trace this circle. What would you do? Create a point here. Very simple. Okay. Create another point here. Click and drag. This is fine. This looks great. And create another point here. Create another point here. Click and drag. And finish it. Just like this. Done. Now, this might not look weird to you, but let me just turn off the circle. Let's have a look. Well, this looks disgusting. And if you don't have double handles, have a look here. It looks very sharp. Anywhere where you don't have a straight handle, any point, it will look sharp. So if you want to make smooth curves, you gotta use two handles. But if you want a corner, you know what to do, right? We'll get to that. Okay, now instead of doing that, if we would have started with a handle just like this, and by the way, you can hold the shift key to make sure that it's straight. So when you hold the shift key, it's all straight. Okay, let's click and drag here. That's fine. Click and drag here. That's great. Click and drag. And complete it. Now have a look. We can always go ahead and edit it. Make it a little larger. I guess we could have made it a little larger. Hold the control key. There we go. Now if you turn it off, it's much more smoother. Have a look. It's so much more smoother. It doesn't have a hard edge. So always have two handles influencing one line to have a smoother curve. Okay? You don't want it to be sharp in the points. Now that circle was easy because it didn't have any sharp edge. How to make complex shapes like this? Okay, just click a point here. Very simple. Let's start. Click a point. Well, let's click another point there and make it just like this. It's looking great. Now, if you click a point here, this line is going to be influenced by this handle. Now there's two things which you can do, right? You can move the handle or you can delete the handle. Okay, so to move the handle, here's what you need to do. Hold the Alt key. Okay, hold the Alt key, click on the handle and move it just like that. Now it's fitting. Now we should have made this point what? A point with handles, but we didn't do it. Don't you need to worry, you don't have to go back. Just let's finish it. Okay, it's straight. All you need to remember, Alt key bends the handles. Alt key removes the handles. Alt key also brings the handle back if you want. So hold the Alt key. This opens up the convert point tool when you take it over a point. And then just click and drag like that. It's too much. Just release the Alt key. Hold the Alt key again to just control one of the curves. Right? Done. And you could have also done one more thing. Hold the Alt key, make a short one, and release the Alt key. Now hold the Control key and then control it just the way you like. Okay. Make it a little, select this one, okay, click on that point and then take it back and you can adjust the way you like, right? Now you can influence that. Now remember that this point doesn't have any handles, just this point and this point. You could have made handles on both the points. Now, here's another way to do it. Let's go back and let's delete this path. And by the way, paths are here under the paths tab. We'll get to that later. Okay, take the pen. Instead of that, we could have just opened up with like this, okay? And created something like this, right? Now, you can hold the Control key and using the direct selection tool, you can adjust it the way you like it. And then you can just make a point here and finish it, just finish it. If you hold the Control key and if you try to edit it, this line, this handle will not break. If you want a sharp edge, the handle needs to break. If the handle is straight, it will be curvy, it won't be sharp. So hold the Alt key, break the angle. And once you break the angle, you can hold the Control key again using the direct selection tool or the Command key if you're using a Mac, and then you can adjust it the way you like, okay? Even here, the handle is not broken. You need to break the handle. How to break the handle? Hold the Alt key and then take the handle and you can do whatever you want with it, right? And it's pretty much done. Have a look. This is a fine piece of path. Now let's take the game to the very next level. Let's trace this heart. Now usually when we are making a heart, what we do is that we make one side of it and we flip that side to make it totally symmetrical. But in this case, just for educational purposes and just to learn, we're going to select the whole. We're going to trace the whole heart. Okay, so I'm going to show you 2 or 3 ways to do this. Click once. Here, you're starting out here. Click and drag. Now, this handle has influenced this curve. This handle will influence what? The upcoming curve. Okay, click and drag, right? It has influenced some, right? Just click and drag like that. Click. Okay. Watch, I didn't click and drag because I didn't want it to be smooth. Okay? Click and drag. You can always edit that later. Click and drag. It's fine. Click and drag. And just let's finish it. That's fine. Now, let me show you one more thing. This is fine. This was very easy. Now here's one more thing I need you to understand. Why we were making this point, you could also have created a handle for it and then broken the handle just like this. Just create a handle and you could have broken that using which key? The Alt key. Alt key transforms the pen tool to the convert point tool. Well, what does the convert point tool do? It converts. What does it convert? It converts corners to curves and curves to corners. Okay. Now this is a curve. We need to convert that into a corner. Now, in case you made a point here, now you need to convert this. Hold the Alt key. Break it like that. It's looking great. Like that. But you don't want this, right? Let's delete it. Okay. With the pen tool selected, make sure auto add and delete is selected. Just hover over it. The pen tool will show a minus. Just click it. It will let go of it. The lesser the point, the better. Always remember, if you want to take one thing away from this video, just take this. The lesser the points, the better. Okay? The more efficient you are. Now you can edit it just like this with broken handles. It's so much more better. Now let me show you another way. So instead of making a point here, you could have used broken handle here.
You need to grow your business. With Taylor Social, you can automate your social media pages in just one click. Whether you are a small business owner or an artist, your social page will look amazing. Simply connect your
何をこかな。何をこかな。何をこかな。何をこかな。何をこかな。どうしようかな。
お店開けますよ。
いらっしゃいませ。いくらにしようかな。ありがとうございました。売れたよ。こんにちは。こんにちは。ありがとうございました。いらっしゃいませ。いくらにしようかな。ありがとうございました。売れたよ。いらっしゃいませ。こんにちは。いくらにしようかな。ありがとうございました。売れたよ。何がいいかな。どれにしよっかな。何がいいかな。どれにしよっかな。何がいいかな。どれにしよっかな。何をこかな。何をこかな。何をこかな。何がいいかな。何がいいかな。どれにしよっかな。何をこかな。何がいいかな。何がいいかな。どれにしよっかな。どれにしよっかな。何をこかな。
はい、何ですか？
何がいいかな。何がいいかな。何がいいかな。どうしようかな。開店です。いらっしゃいませ。いくらにしようかな。ありがとうございました。売れたよ。こんにちは。いくらにしようかな。ありがとうございました。売れたよ。こんにちは。これなんかどうでしょう。いくらにしようかな。ありがとうございました。売れたよ。いらっしゃいませ。いくらにしようかな。ありがとうございました。売れたよ。いらっしゃいませ。いくらにしようかな。ありがとうございました。売れたよ。レベルアップ。こんにちは。いくらにしようかな。 ございました。売れたよ。いらっしゃいませ。いくらにしようかな。ありがとうございました。売れたよ。こんにちは。いくらにしようかな。ありがとうございました。売れたよ。いらっしゃいませ。いくらにしようかな。ありがとうございました。売れたよ。おやすみ。
おやすみなさい。今日も頑張りましたね。明日もこの調子でいきましょう。
ピオ？そんな。
おやすみなさい。
おはよう。
おはようございます。何でしょうか。セーブします。
行ってきます。
セーブします。